go. I thought I'd get going a little early, and it was so early I wasn't prepared. How y'all doing? I hope you're having a good day. It is Kristi. It is Sunday, and that means it is Weekend Winters. And yeah, I was just so excited to get going. I'm jumping the gun a little early here. We're going 1 minute earlier than planned, but that's okay, because I'm a little bit keen to get going on this. I think some other people are quite keen to get going on this, so let's. But before we start, actually I didn't put that window in the chat, but I want to say hi to a couple people. So say hello to Troy, to Sib, to DNF, to Cedar. Glad you're able to make it live this time. To Paul, and that's everyone I see in the chat so far, but if I see anyone else, I will call out and say hello. So, okay, let us get going. I've got a window open because my computer's overheated, so if it's a little bit loud outside, we're just going to have to deal with it. Okay, so we are going to hopefully, Poe Mama Sid, how you doing? We're going to try to finish up with this King Crocoduck article. So let me go ahead and bop us over to that place. Oh, let me just drop down the chat a little bit so that you can see yourselves before I move you all over. There we go. There you are. So, yes, we have been hacking away at this article. I think is the only way to really describe it, right? Hacking away at this for several weeks now. And technical problems aside, it is a bit lengthy in terms of its word count. It is not all that substantive, though. So what we found out so far is that King Crocoduck is making up his own definitions, which is not scholarly or academic or grounded in empirical reality. He has gone so far as to define woke fragility, discomfort and defensiveness on the part of a woke person when confronted with information about racial inequality and injustice that isn't flattering to their worldview. Oh my gosh. The necessary and sufficient conditions that would have to be met to meet this criteria are interesting, to say the least. We've also not got a good definition of his woke folks term, or his, there's also woke ideology and woke privilege, all of which remain rather undefined. So yes, it is time we finish up with the mythical Crocoduck. And what we've also found out is that in terms of his argument, he's not really, again, grounding it in empirics or in things that are like in any way. Why is this acting all weird? So I had this all set to go, and it's acting a little bit strange now. So tell you what, I'm going to get out of Word. I think Word might be a little bit freaking out for some reason. Don't know why. That's okay, but we'll pick up where we left off. Now, where we left off last time in Croc's attempt to answer the question, what are the questions? What is my question? What is my answer? Why should you believe me? And why should you care? So far, we have the question, I guess, what is woke fragility? What is the answer? Whatever King Crocoduck thinks it is, I guess. She says as she clinks her glass against her teeth because it's that amusing. Why should you believe him? No reason to believe him. And why should you care? Like, how does this relate to our lives? Other than like being this existential menace to people who don't like to unpack and dismantle racial discrimination or other forms of oppression. Okay. So where we left off was he tried to give a series of examples of when the stresses that I guess show up when people, the woke people with their woke privilege feel like their woke ideology is being attacked, and so their woke fragility reacts. Where does exhibiting woke fragility? Hi, PZ, good to see you. So just to say, woke fragility manifests when empirical and analytical stress is applied to woke ideology, not to a person, to an ideology. Again, there's a lot of conflation between human beings and ideas that aren't properly separated. And then he has these stressors can take the forms of, come from a range of sources, and then he just goes ahead and gives a series of hypotheticals with no connection whatsoever to reality. Just, hey, these are things that can happen without actually showing that they happen. So where we've gotten to now is the section where he's going to discuss factors that inculcate woke fragility. Now, what you would normally, what a scholar would do in these situations with someone who has an actual thesis and a causal mechanism in mind, and they have operationalized their concepts, and they have metrics in the world that they want to look to, what you would do here is try to provide an overview of the causal mechanism first. So you want to say, in the next section, I'm going to explain how X and Y influence A and B, showing a positive or negative relationship, or interact with another variable, something like that. The idea is you give people an overall understanding of what the causal mechanism is before you jump into it. Because if you don't give people a roadmap to where you're going, they're always trying to figure out what's important in your next paragraph, and they don't know what's important. That's why you tell them what's important at the start. You tell them what you're going to tell them. Then you tell them, and then what do? You tell them what you told them. So it's really just about making sure people understand where your train of thought is going. So I'm not going to read this. I've got better things to do with my voice. Now, I have to say that the one in the Word, the Read Aloud program, isn't that pleasant to listen to. But then again, this writing isn't pleasant to listen to. So it's not like, I guess a nicer voice might ease some of the pain. But for all intents and purposes, this is as painful as reading as it is to hear, both from the voice and from the read aloud. So just to say, what he lacks in quantity, he tries to make for upon stupidity. Can I have mathematical fragility when someone disagrees with my answers to a problem? Yes. His own name is a straw man. All right, so, oh my God, there's so many words. We still have almost 5,000 words of nothing to get through. But I guess, that's my opinion. That is 5,000 words of nothing. I'll go ahead and let you, I'm just going to center my picture a little bit more. Moving it over. Oh, this way. Moving it. Yeah, let's hit this and see what beautiful argumentation. Yeah, speech can only do so much with a bad content anyway, right? So this should work. I tested it out before, but let's just take it for a little test drive.
Factors that inculcate woke fragility.
Just want to check. So that, to my ear, or at least to my metrics on my interface, my OBS, should be of equal sound. Can people just give me a little check in the chat that those sound balances are okay for you, that it's not too much? I had Friday fragility because I thought the work week would never end, and it was super stressful. Yeah, anything can be fragility under for Croc. Again, there might be some kind of deep insider joke with the white fragility book that he's doing here, but I haven't read that, and if that was the case, he should have made that clear in his writing. All right, if no one's complaining about the audio, I'm going to accept. I'm just going to figure out it's fine, and if you guys start complaining, that I'll readjust. All right, here we go.
Factors that inculcate woke fragility. Ideological isolation. The first factor leading to woke fragility is the ideologically isolated lives which most woke folk lead. Even if woke folk live in close proximity to political dissidents, ideological isolation happens at both the representational and the informational level.
Based on what information? Like, I guess if you could appeal to this to say, let's say, but the problem with this, honestly, is that if you look at the media consumption of people who are on the left, we have a broader framework of media consumption. Anything from NPR, CNN, New York Times, MSNBC, ABC, whereas the right use Fox, OAN. So again, okay, I'm just going to say sus. Don't accept that empirical assertion whatsoever, and I have no reason to, based on the evidence that's not been presented.
Levels. That is to say, both the constituencies of woke folks' social groups and the art and news that they consume are likely to be predominantly, if not exclusively, of an ideological bent that reinforces, rather than challenges, their wokeness.
I'm sorry, this coming from a right-wing guy, sort of trying to lecture the left about art and news that are of reinforce, that's just, again, that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. This is really fantasy level descriptions of stuff going on.
Wokeness. They receive little or no authentic information about the empirical and analytical challenge.
Authentic information. Interesting here. He's making a claim about the level of authenticity as if the social world has an objective, authentic truth that can be found, as opposed to being a series of perspectives on factual events that people interpret. Again, this is awful. This is so bad. If this was an essay an undergraduate student handed into me, I can confidently tell you now they would have failed. Absolutely failed this assignment. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Challenges to their ideology and are thus unprepared to think about it critically or with complexity.
Sorry, just like the ability to think about it critically or with complexity is such a self-own. Croc, what have you been doing this whole time? You're doing the thing, you're just projecting. You're not describing, you're projecting.
Growing up in ideologically isolated environments. Schools,
again, empirical claim.
Neighborhoods, media images and historical perspectives. Woke interests and perspectives are almost always central.
Empirical claim, unsupported.
An inability to see or consider significance in the perspectives of political dissidents results.
Again, empirical claim,
Further,
unsupported.
woke folk are taught not to feel any loss over the absence of political dissidents in their lives, and in fact this absence is what defines their social groups as good.
All right, so if you don't hang out with Nazis, if you find out someone you know is a homophobe and you're like, you know what, I'm not going to tolerate that in my space. If you want to hang out with me, I don't want to hear any of that. And, you know, like, I don't want to see you pushing that. I don't want to, like, hear any of that from you. But no, you got to accept Nazis, according to Croc. Got to be friends with Nazis. Friendship is more important than standing up for moral values and human rights. Good to know where he stands.
Come to understand that a good ally or good organization is coded language for an ideological lockstep.
Ideological lockstep here being the ending of oppression and dismantling of white supremacy and patriarchy, ideally. Oh no, we can't have that. You got to be friends with racists, so they don't want to hurt their feelings.
Lockstep. Equivalently.
Okay, hold on. Troy says, I read White Fragility. This is pretty much a copy and paste of our chapter replacing white with woke. It's a mediocre article responding to a mediocre book. I actually think the book is probably even more mediocre because it probably has actual empirical sources. Can you confirm that, Troy? That there's a reference section and studies? Again, this is, it's embarrassing that he would just try to do a quick, cheap inversion and not even attempt to make a decent argument and then put this out here.
They come to understand that a basket of deplorables or problematic organization is coded language for ideological dissident. The quality of woke space being in large part measured via the absence of political dissidents, and conservatives in particular, is a profound message indeed, one that is deeply internalized and reinforced daily through normalized discourses about allyship. This dynamic of gain rather than loss via ideological isolation may be the most profound aspect of woke ideological indoctrination.
So the thing is, so now knowing that he is just trying to do a cheap inversion of woke ideology, the fact is that these criticisms do apply to white culture, and that white people tend to be culturally isolated. They tend to consume a very narrow, people on the right who are like white right-wingers, not saying that other right-wingers don't, but we're going to discuss that group. They do consume a very narrow set of media. This is why it doesn't work now knowing this, because what he's trying to impute on the left just doesn't fit, but it does fit on the right. White people live in a white bubble. White people consume a very narrow set of media if you look at the right-wing media consumption. And they definitely they associate whiteness with Americanness. So it doesn't work in the reverse because it just doesn't.
Historicism and collectivism. Woke folk are taught to see their ideology as inevitably victorious and representative of the interests of humanity generally. The belief in the march of history towards a global multicultural utopia, coupled with positioning woke ideology as outside of any particular culture, and thus the norm for humanity, allows woke folk to view themselves as inherently progressive beings who triumphantly facilitate historical progress.
Yeah, none of this is substantiated. It's all basically delusional thinking at this point. There's no... Okay. Troy, there's references in White Fragility, but the research sources are a bit too sparse when it comes to her D'Angelo's biggest arguments, but at least there's some. Yeah, at least there's some linking. I haven't read White Fragility. I don't really care about White Fragility. It seems like a popular book, not a scholarly one, so... It's like Malcolm Gladwell. Like it has an influence maybe, or it has some good points, but it's not a contribution to knowledge. So this, it's why this reads so weak, and it doesn't have the impact that King Crocoduck thinks it does, because the things that he's alleging don't actually match reality.
This is evidenced when they compare some feature of society as it presently stands, i.e. the current prevalence of rape, poverty, and bigotry, to a hypothetical future ideal, i.e. imagine a world without any rape, poverty, or bigotry at all, and use the failure of society to live up to these utopian standards as evidence that existing institutions have failed the people.
Wait, you mean evidence that existing institutions have failed the people as evidence? That I'm sorry, how could you be mad about this? If you can say, yeah, imagine a world where, hey, it doesn't even have to be without, let's say, assault. How about we just live in a world where every single kit collected from that assault is processed properly and in a timely manner, and that victims are taken seriously. So, yeah, the failure of society to live up to its own ideals is actually evidence that the society has failed to live up to its ideals. How did he think this was a good idea? Oh my God! Did he read this? Did he read this before? They're using evidence that society isn't living up to its ideals as evidence that society isn't living up to its ideals. Has got to be the best part of this so far. All right. Oh, God, we still have so many thousands of words. Let's keep going.
They then step in and insist that only through the installation of woke folk into positions of power can society begin to remedy its defects.
I was going to say, like, if white guys haven't sorted this out in the last 400 years, maybe give other people a chance? I'm just saying, they can't do worse.
They give no consideration whatsoever to the wealth of empirical evidence supporting the fact that the prevalence of rape, poverty, and bigotry has, under the management of our present culture and institutions, reached historical lows.
Oh, and we're supposed to be happy with that. See, oh, God, okay. Hold on, I have to cough. I don't even know how you justify this position, y'all. Look, we only have, we have way fewer lynchings now. We only have, or basically, the modern versions of lynchings. Why can't you people be happy? Hey, we finally outlawed marital sexual assault in the 1990s. What are you complaining about? This idea that groups that are marginalized or victimized, that they should be happy that it's happening less often, doesn't matter when it happens to a person. Maybe Croc can live with that level of violence and harm because he's not experiencing it, I think that's why he tolerates it so easily, is because he's not the victim of these things that we're talking about here. Oh, gosh.
Lows. This is because reality's failure to conform to their impossible standards is precisely what licenses their power grabs in the first place.
Wanting to make things better is a power grab. Wanting to take over management of institutions that have historically and continue to fail most of the population is a power grab. But the people who are in power, who are not doing the job and not protecting the people, that's not a power grab. You see, when white men, especially conservative white men, grab power, that's natural. And when other people try to take that power away from conservative white men, that's not natural, is pretty much what I'm hearing in this text. I don't know about you, that's what I hear.
By diagnosing society with illnesses that can never be cured, either because the illnesses are imaginary or because their standards for what constitutes an illness render societal health a practical impossibility.
Who cares if it's impossible to end all bigotry? We should still have that as a goal. Because if you don't, that means you're settling for some level of bigotry or poverty or violence. Again, this isn't humanism or even moral. It's basically saying I'm willing to tolerate other people's suffering because to do anything else would make me more uncomfortable.
They introduce the pretext required for their appointment to perpetual bureaucratic oversight over problems that will never be solved.
Yeah, murder will never be solved. It doesn't mean we don't continue to prosecute it and try to find ways to prevent it and try to reduce violence or the causes that lead to it. Again, this tolerance of violence and death because it's inconvenient to live in a society that tries to prevent it a little bit more. Holy, this is such white male privilege. I'm sorry. He's just, I can feel the tears on his cheek as he's writing this.
This generates a money-making engine that can persist for as long as the public remains convinced about the nature of these illnesses as woke folk have portrayed them.
Yeah, so much money in the left.
All the while, their unfounded belief in the movement of history towards the ideals espoused by their worldview functions as a kind of blindness, an inability to think about wokeness as a particular ideology among many that purport to have solutions to all of humanity's problems.
I don't think wokeness has ever purported to be the solution to all of humanity's problems, because even at its most basic level, wokeness is merely awareness of the institutions and their processes that maintain oppression and basically normalize violence in a society. So, again, no. All right, let's keep going here.
Problems. In this position, wokeness is not recognized or named by woke folk, and an objectively progressive reference point is assumed. Woke folk, as they present themselves, aren't merely subscribers to one worldview among many which compete for dominance in a pluralistic society. Woke folk are on the right side of history. Within this construction, woke folk can represent the interests of humanity, while political dissidents, who are always problematic and almost always conservative, can only represent their own biased and uneducated experiences, which invariably serve as hindrances to progress.
Yeah, that's not theory, that's fact. I mean, just look at all of the bills there's a bill in one state that targeted 4 trans students, or even just 1 trans student. This is, again, basically saying what conservative white men have done forever in terms of using power to establish the kind of society that they want to create that protects themselves and their wealth and their power. They're the only ones who can do that. Anyone else who tries to get equality or to open up access to that kind of power and wealth and balance things out, well, they're the troublemakers. Okay. Let's keep going.
The collectivist discourse of the primacy of demography functions similarly to the historicist discourse of the right side of history, but instead of declaring that we all need to struggle to bring about utopia, a process which woke folk euphemistically describe in more palatable terms like dismantling white supremacy.
So let's just think psychologically into this insight, into Croc's mind from this. What he's saying is that he thinks that dismantling white supremacy is a utopian ideal, that we will never be able to actually dismantle white supremacy. And by categorizing it as such, he is basically saying that white supremacy is a normal, is a default, and is acceptable. And that we should all just stop railing against these, utopian ideals of not living in a white supremacist society, or not living in a patriarchal society with its toxic norms and its transphobia and its homophobia and its justification of violence against people who don't adopt those toxic norms. I just, how can you... I guess he's just not an egalitarian. At the end of the day, he's happy living in a hierarchy where some people just suffer so that he can enjoy a comfortable life.
Dismantling white supremacy and smashing the patriarchy, the collectivist declares that we all need to see each other as embodiments of our demographic categories. In other words, the ideology of collectivism allows them to posit that every member of a given set of intersecting demographic groups is the same.
No. What? No. Not every member of an intersecting demographic group is the same. That's the point of intersectionality. The point of intersectionality is to start to see the variegated nature of identities interacting on a person's life. The prism of effects that has. It's the opposite of saying that every member of a given intersecting group is the same. Unless he means, everyone who has... I don't even know what he's saying here. And it's not really worth the intellectual effort to try to tease out what he means, because it's not based in reality.
In response to this, political dissident...
Yeah, he is arguing, by the way, Andrew. He's arguing that power is for the privileged, and those privileges come from having the right skin color and standing up when you pee.
In response to this...
Not saying that people, everyone could probably stand up while they pee, but let's say that they're interested in cis genitals. and whiteness of skin color here.
In response to this, political dissidents will not typically critique the conventional usefulness of demographic categories. They won't pretend to be unable to see color. However,
yeah, just to make a note, because when you can't see color, you're locking all of the current levels of privilege that white people have into place by denying that they actually have any privilege. You give white people a 400-year head start, and then they're like, "Oh, I don't see color anymore. Everything is fine now. Everything is equal, even though I've got 400 years worth of, white people's benefits in my bank account, in my education, all that kind of stuff."
they will point out that when applied in a prescriptive fashion, collectivism functions to deny the significance of both individual agency and the private capacity to reflect on one's own values irrespective of the manner in which one was socialized.
Again, there's a whole bunch of
Furthermore,
empirical
the
claims that are
political dissident
unsupported
will
here.
argue that collectivism mistakenly assumes that differences in people's experiences are fundamentally reducible to the demographic categories to which they belong, which would mean that woke folk deny the possibility of experiences and opportunities that are racially neutral.
No. Again, a citation needed. I don't, I'm sure within group stuff there are racially neutral things. It's not that it doesn't exist. Okay, such crap here. Such
Woke
crap.
folks' claims to collectivism are thus challenged by acknowledging the demographic independent capacity for private critical deliberation,
No, it's not.
as well as the agency to act upon the beliefs that result from such reflection.
So what the problem here is, this last sentence, is that because Crockett isn't actually educated in these topics. So when he's talking about things at a systemic level, and he's saying here that this critique sort of ignores the role of the individual, what he doesn't realize is that, like CRT, critical theory, they are aggregate level, they are macro level critiques. They're looking at structures, they're looking at cultures. That doesn't exclude the possibility of the role of the individual inside those systems, but that comes down to a psychological level, not a sociological one. So, So the fact is here that no one is saying any individual in a system can't have independent thoughts. What they're saying is that whatever your independent thoughts are, you are put into a culture that was predetermined for you and already has a set of values. Or you join an institution like education, or you're put into the justice, system, or even employment. Whatever systems are out there, you don't have 100% autonomy, agency, because you're coming into something that already has a whole bunch of norms and biases and bigotries built into it. So, no, you never, critical theory doesn't deny a capacity for anyone to do individual agent things. It's saying that no matter what your individual agentic notions are, you are trapped in a system that is bigger than you. And you can rail against it, or you can work with it, or you can critique it, or you can ignore it, but it will determine your options in certain ways.
When confronted with these objections, woke folks' prime directive is to pretend to misunderstand the critique and instead to condescendingly inform the dissident that it's okay to see color. By pretending that the dissident's defenses of individualism are shallow performances by fragile personalities incapable of admitting their ability to see differences between people.
Except I didn't just do that. So, prediction falsified, Croc. In your article that is a bunch of crock.
People, woke folk position themselves as frank and understanding interlocutors who merely advocate the recognition of and respect for members of other demographics.
He's so resentful of the fact that people want to give other people rights that the privileged group didn't enjoy. He's so mad.
In this way, they can use the uncontroversial fact that there exist identifiable differences between groups as a Trojan horse for the much more contentious claims about the primacy of demography and the attendant moral prescription.
It's not the primacy of demography. It's institutions and structures. It's because people have built racism into the labor market, into housing zones, and the physical makeup of cities, where roads go. All of this stuff, it's not because of the demographics, it's because of what people in power did because of those demographics. He's missing a big part of the puzzle here in his description.
Of different groups differently, thus erasing the individual and their silly little agency and capacity for private critical reflection. D'Angelo does this masterfully throughout her book, often spicing up this tactic with the condescending remark that white people don't understand socialization in order
He's
to
so
vaguely
mad.
invoke psychosocial forces as a determinant of people's personalities and perspectives.
I think Croc read that book and felt seen and got super mad, is my guess. Because there's a lot of resentment here and stuff in his tone. And, like this obsession with condescending remarks. It's a lot of hurt feelings, I think.
In order to vaguely invoke psychosocial forces as a determinant of people's personalities and perspectives. The moral is clear: when a serious challenge is issued to collectivism, woke folks' first line of defense is to condescendingly misrepresent the challenge before vaguely deferring to the supposedly deterministic nature of social forces.
Okay, first of all, like social forces aren't deterministic insofar as like they aren't changeable. I'm sorry. There's just condescendingly misrepresent the challenge. Pot kettle black, mate. Also, this is just a series of complaints. I don't see an actual attempt to connect any of these things together to like white fragility. So again, this is more of a screed than a case. And it really doesn't look, he's not being witty or clever or convincing if outside of his own bubble. If that was his goal, no one outside of his bubble is going to find this very convincing.
Entitlement to ideological comfort. In the dominant position, woke folk are almost always ideologically comfortable and thus have developed unchallenged expectations to remain so.
Yeah, in the dominant position, because there are so many like progressive people running businesses these days. So many progressive people running governments these days. What is this dominant position? Does that mean existing? Does it mean like people who want to challenge unfair structures of oppression exist? I don't see them in the dominant position at all.
And thus have developed unchallenged expectations to remain so. Woke folk have not had to build tolerance for ideological discomfort.
Wow. Yeah. Again, if this is an inversion of what white people experience, it explains why this article is so crap. Because it is the fact that people who are not white walk out their door every day in the back of their minds knowing that they might be harassed or racially bullied. People who are not cis live with this every day. And the people who are privileged, the people who do live in a bubble and very infrequently come up against any challenges to their worldview are right-wing white people. And so again, of course, people who are marginalized live building tolerance with ideological discomfort. Croc is so divorced from reality and anyone else's experiences, it's pretty shocking.
Thus, when ideological stress is applied, woke folk typically respond as if something is wrong and blame the person or event that triggered their discomfort.
So this again, thanks Troy for giving me the insight. White people, again, conservative, right? But just as generally, I think white people who are unaccustomed to discussing issues of racial discrimination and bias in the States, they will avoid those conversations because they don't want to, feel uncomfortable. There are several studies that show that white people basically feel uncomfortable discussing race because they don't know how to talk about it because they don't really deal with it and they don't try to solve the problem. So they become offended and they take it personally when a racist system is criticized. So, hey,
this blame
easy.
results in
Good
a
to see
socially
you.
sanctioned array of countermeasures against the perceived source of discomfort, including penalization, retaliation, isolation, ostracization, and refusal to continue engagement.
Citations
Woke
needed.
insistence on ideological comfort ensures that their privilege will not be challenged. This insistence also functions to punish those who break woke codes of comfort.
Empirical claim that's not been supported with with empirical evidence. Croc, come on.
Woke folk often confuse comfort with safety, such as when they treat language as a form of violence. And
again, literally after every sentence, I want to just say again, citations needed, because this is delusional at this point.
And state that they don't feel safe when what they really mean is that they don't.
And by that I mean he's trying to claim he knows the thought processes, feelings, and intentions of millions of people. He thinks he's mind reading. That's what he's claiming. Without making reference to actual studies or empirical claims, he's essentially saying, I can read minds. I don't believe him.
Don't feel comfortable. This trivializes their history of injustices towards political dissidents and perverts the reality of that history.
It doesn't even make sense anymore.
Don't think complexly about the contents of their belief system. They don't ask themselves what safety means from a position of societal dominance, where...
Again, if this is just inverting white privilege, it's so crap because none of this rings true. And it makes him look really bad.
Where they have the ability to summon hateful mobs and instigate punitive action by employers against political dissidents by merely accusing them of partaking in hateful expression.
No. You know, when like people, the Nazi tiki-torch carrying Nazis were chanting, will not replace us, groups will not replace us. I don't want to say. Yeah, that wasn't partaking, accusing that. Again, he's out here defending Nazis.
They don't ask themselves what safety means.
Right?
Given their
That's who he's rooting for.
Woke folk who complain about safety when political dissidents are merely talking about woke ideology in an unflattering manner. And given the amount of societal power afforded to woke folk when they posture as vulnerable targets every time someone disagrees with them, it is better that they remain ignorant.
So, by the way, Troy, thank you for popping by in the chat. You write, as a concept, white fragility is observable. This is true. There are studies that have shown this for a long time. The book itself goes on some strange tangents. King Crocoduck is repeating D'Angelo's appeal to motive problems. So instead of doing a better job of what then D'Angelo did in her book, he's basically making all the same mistakes while he's trying to claim some level of moral superiority. Is that what it is? That would not surprise me. He's going to steal someone else's idea, do it the exact same, and then like pretend like he's doing it better. That doesn't surprise me.
Ideological arrogance. Woke ideological hegemony includes strongly positive images of the woke self as well as strongly negative images of dissident others. This self...
Every sentence, citation needed. Just put it in your mind. Every time a sentence ends, 9 times out of 10, it needs a citation needed description, because all of this is unsupported nonsense.
This self-image engenders a self-perpetuating sense of entitlement because many woke folk believe that their disproportionate share of the cultural capital is the result of their being on the right side of history while ignoring the fact of woke privilege. Because most woke folk have not been trained to think complexly about their ideology in schools or mainstream discourse, and because it benefits woke dominance not to do so, they have a very limited understanding of their ideological hegemony.
All right, so again, not knowing what words mean. People who are on the opposite, like the people who are working to dismantle white supremacy and the patriarchy are not the hegemonic powers of the day. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to be fighting. It's like basic words like hegemony he's not getting right. Look, Croc, use a dictionary. Like, look words up. The idea that... progressive ideology is the hegemonic position of the United States just kind of fails to take into account reality. All of it. All of it. Like, this is laughable. It's so bad. Okay. Let's continue on with this nonsense because we're going to get through this. And then next week, I have to do... All right. You listen. I have to create a poll for the chat.
Arrogance, and in this ideological arrogance, woke folk have no compunction about dismissing the challenges offered to them by the unwashed masses, no matter how well formulated or empirically supported their arguments are. Woke folk feel free to dismiss the perspectives of the hoi polloi rather than have the humility to acknowledge that familiarity with a given topic and the analytic capabilities required to formulate a coherent argument in relation to it are not the exclusive purview of those with credentials in a relevant field. Thus, they bully dissenters out of the conversation by attacking their lack of credentials instead of their arguments, closing rank around disciplinary borders in an attempt to discredit any outsider who has the temerity to challenge them.
Honestly, that's not the case. Croc, I'm here ass the whole time. I don't care about your credentials. I care about your citations. And there ain't none. So, again... it's not about your lack of credentials. I think autodidacts and people who are self-taught are, oftentimes the best learners because they care about a topic. But you have to. Why should you believe me? You haven't once told me why I should believe anything in here by making a reference to anything besides your delusional internal monologue. So, all right. So yeah, there's a poll going on. If you want to continue on with the next part of this, or if you want to break from King Crocoduck, then next week you can go ahead and vote now, and I will look by the end of the show.
Social, economic, and political power within a woke dominant culture.
Oh my God, we're only halfway through.
Political dissidents' complaints about the erosion of a pluralistic polity by an ideology that insists on total control over all cultural and political institutions. Yet woke folk are the least likely to see, understand, or be invested in validating those assertions and being honest about their consequences, which leads them to claim that the perspectives which challenge their worldview are the result of people not understanding their theories, when in fact people understand them perfectly well.
You know what? I can't believe that Croc understands the theories that he's trying to criticize in here, because he hasn't demonstrated it. So again, sus.
Woke folk thus assert their superiority over those whom they deem with magisterial certainty to be the products of a failed educational system, effectively consigning dissidents to the status of imbeciles.
You know, Croc, you're not helping us not do that. I'm just gonna say, like, if what you're saying is that me as a woke folk here is consigning your dissent to the status of imbecile, it's only because I'm doing it based on your writing. Because you're not backing up, you're not doing the basics of what you need to do to be convincing. So, you know, I can't really feel responsible at all for that one.
In so doing, they mistake disagreement for misunderstanding. This ideological arrogance, coupled with the...
No, I'm pretty sure you misunderstand, Croc. I've sat through many of your words here. Pretty confident you don't understand. So I'm just going to go out on a limb there.
This ideological arrogance, coupled with the need for
It's not ideological arrogance, it's just knowing what the things really mean and being able to point out when you don't. That's not arrogance, that's called intellectual accuracy or ideological accuracy.
Ideological comfort
accuracy
also has woke folk insisting that political dissidents explain social phenomena in the right way. The right way is generally whatever they decree it to be.
No, the right way is grounded in empirical reality. Like, critical race theory as a theory emerged from looking at how the law, the field of law operated, and that there is inherent racial discrimination throughout the law, institutionalized by the law. That's not, like describing something in the right or wrong way. That's just describing it as it is, what exists, as like the facts in the law, and just looking at the pattern.
The right way is generally whatever they decree it to be, without reference to those statistics and arguments that they habitually dismiss out of hand for the simple reason that they are unable to offer any persuasive refutation to them.
The piece that has no links whatsoever to reality, and you're gonna try to lecture people on the left who understand social science that we don't make reference to statistics. This is hilarious. This is so hilarious. It's just okay. Continuing.
Ideological belonging. Woke folk enjoy a deeply internalized, largely unconscious sense of ideological belonging in Western societies.
Again, if this is his attempt to... It doesn't work with wokeness. It really doesn't. Whiteness is internalized, unconscious sense of ideological belonging in Western societies, because in Western societies, whiteness, and in particular cis maleness, are considered like the norm. So when you try to say people who are outside of that have an unconscious sense of ideological belonging in Western societies, you can just tell that this is a crap argument. Why would you put this in here? Oh my God. Anyone else losing the will to live? This is like one of his 40-minute videos. He says, he goes on and on and on and on and on and on about things that he could say in 3 sentences, but he uses like 30 paragraphs. I'm just going to out of hand reject ideological belonging because that doesn't make any sense. I'm trying to get to the end of this. So let's move on to, okay, what does he say? Here.
I posit that it is the intentionality that is so disquieting, as long as they aren't forced into situations where they have to confront dissidents, as long as it just happens that they live ideologically segregated lives, they can maintain a fragile facade of open-mindedness and tolerance.
Again, this doesn't make sense when you just invert it from white people, because people who are, discriminated by against white supremacy, they don't live in like, what do they call it? Like ideological segregated lives, situations where they confront like, God, this is so bad. I can't even believe anyone liked this. All right, psychic freedom. This should be interesting. Oh my God! All right, we're on page 11 of 16. It's a marathon.
Psychic freedom. Because the property of being problematic is constructed as residing in political dissidence, woke folk don't bear the social burden of their ideology. They move easily through our society without a sense of themselves as ideologically entrenched subjects.
Again, this is just such crap, and easily refuted by looking at around to see that people who are marginalized easily move through society without a sense of themselves as ideologically entrenched subject. People who experience microaggressions every day, people who experience racism or bigotry or sexist comments, they don't, again, this is just garbage. Croc. I knew that this could possibly be bad, but honestly, the longer it goes on, the worse it's gotten. It's so lazy. It's so unthoughtful. It's unreferenced. It's just, honestly, it's mad feels. It's mad feels in like 6,000 words that nobody needs to read.
They see ideological indoctrination as operating when political dissidents are present, but all woke spaces as safe spaces, untainted by problematic perspectives vis-a-vis the absence of the carriers of problematic ideology, and thereby the ideological polluters, political dissidents. This perspective is perfectly captured in the familiar woke statement, "I was lucky. I was educated into progressive thought, so I didn't get trapped in reactionary ideology."
What familiar woke statement? I've never heard anyone say this. So what is he saying? How is he measuring familiar? Ugh, God, I'm getting really exhausted of this crap. I don't know if, we'll see what
In
the
this
poll says.
move,
I think we're all
wokeness
tired of
gains
Croc
its
at this
meaning
point.
through its purported sanitization
looks
of all
like
things
it.
problematic. Because ideological segregation is deemed socially valuable while simultaneously non-ideological and unremarkable, woke folk rarely, if ever, have to think critically about the implications of their belief system, and receive no penalty for not thinking about it.
Again, God, this is so lazy and crap and garbage, because it's just not true. Again, marginalized people have to think critically all the time about the implications of basically collaborating with a system that oppresses them or resisting it. Oh, this is getting really tedious. And the other thing, too, is, of course, he can't say something in 5 words when he can say it in 15. All right. Anyone else getting kind of tired of that? Let's see if is there conclusions? Oh, my God. Look at how long this goes. All right. Okay, let's go right to the summary, because I'm getting tired of this. There's nothing convincing in this paper. It doesn't make any reference to empirical reality. It doesn't even try to make a serious argument. It's just mad feels and, this attempted inversion of a book that, again, it's a popular book. It's not an academic book, but at least D'Angelo does make an effort to reference. Like, I would be interested, let's see, white fragility, and references. Is there a section there? Summary. Read summary and analysis. Let's see. No, it looks like it's just exercises here. I'd be interested to know. I know that Troy in the chat, you said there are some, but sometimes in journals they'll say, "Oh, what article is this?" Okay, this is first published in the International Journal of Critical Pedagogy in 2011. So in this piece, which probably has about the same number of words, let's just do a word count. Can we do a word count? I don't know. Let's go find out. Yeah, usually these articles are like 5,000 or 6,000 words. So I'm not going to make an effort to do a perfect word count right now. But let's look at the references. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 1 page, 1 full page, 2 full pages. We'll call it 2.5 pages of references. 2.5 pages of references with, it's not the same person over and over again. It's quite a varied list here. And I'm going to guess it's about the same number of words. Now let's go and check Croc's piece. Because, he thinks that what he did was just as good as Robin DiAngelo, right? Oh, look, no references. Okay, let's hear his conclusion. Because, remember, in an essay, you tell him what you're going to tell him. Then you tell him. And then you tell him what you told him. So a conclusion in a paper like this should say, in this paper, I asked the question, blah, 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 blah. The answer I found was blah, 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 blah. And the reason for this was A, B, C, and D, which allows us to conclude X, Y, and Z. And that's what you do. And then you might go on to say, hey, this research is really interesting. It deserves more funding. But so let's see what his summary is. It is his summary and attempt to do a recapitulation, or not a recapitulation, a restatement of the main points of his paper, because that's what good writing should do. Let's see.
In summary, the principal function of woke fragility is to keep woke ideology out of reach from those who would do it violence with their empirical and analytical critiques. This essay has covered the conditions under which woke fragility manifests.
No,
the
it
basic
hasn't.
discursive maneuvers typically associated with woke fragility.
No, it
and
hasn't.
the manner in which these work together to protect their ideology from criticism.
Nope.
But there is still much to discuss in relation to the actual contents of woke ideology. In fact, there is more to discuss on that topic than could reasonably be covered in a single essay, and it is not my mission here to offer a complete exposition of woke political theory. If there is sufficient interest in the topic, future essays on this website might earnestly discuss the rhetorical and psychosocial mechanisms exploited by woke folk in order to advance their thesis, and to that end, there would be discussions of certain foundational ideas within the ideology for the purpose of illustrating just how their analytical and...
Anyone else noticing how empty his words are? He's really quite adept at using a whole lot of words but really saying nothing. He gives an illusion, a veneer of competency. But when you unpack it, when you look deeper, there's no substance to it.
And empirical shortcomings are routinely obscured through the tactical deployment of manipulative rhetoric and psychosocial chicanery.
That's exactly what he's doing here. like physician, heal thyself.
Chicanery. Woke fragility, as explicated over the course of this essay, comes instinctively to most woke folk,
Empirical
who
claim.
spontaneously make use of it in order to protect the ideology from the hazards of critical thought. But a master manipulator must also understand the nuances behind the language used to sell fake illnesses in order to be able to properly engage woke ideology's persuasive apparatus.
That's what he's doing. He's trying to be a master manipulator, using basically obfuscatory language to sell a fake outrage, to engage a persuasive argument for people who are racist and homophobic and transphobic and basically reactionary.
If there is interest in future discussions around the woke rhetoric employed by such manipulators, then kindly share, applaud, and comment on this post.
All right, now I'm curious now that we've already found the DiAngelo stuff. Let us compare. I just want to see what her last paragraph, her section looks like. It might not be all that great because in the let's go down here. So, let's see, let's do a comparison of his nemesis.
Conclusion: white people often believe that multicultural /anti-racist education is only necessary for those who interact with minorities or in diverse environments. However, the dynamics discussed here suggest that it is critical that all white people build the stamina to sustain conscious and explicit engagement with race. When whites posit race as non-operative because there are few, if any, people of color in their immediate environments, whiteness is reinscribed ever more deeply. Derman, Sparks and Ramsey, 2006. When whites only notice race to others, we reinscribe whiteness by continuing to posit whiteness as universal and non-whiteness as other. Further, if we can't listen to or comprehend the perspectives of people of color, we cannot bridge cross-racial divides. A continual retreat from the discomfort of authentic racial engagement results in a perpetual cycle that works to hold racism in place. While anti-racist efforts ultimately seek to transform institutionalized racism, anti-racist education may be most effective by starting at the micro level. The goal is to generate the development of perspectives and skills that enable all people, regardless of racial location, to be active initiators of change. Since all individuals who live within a racist system are enmeshed in its relations, this means that all are responsible for either perpetuating or transforming that system. However, although all individuals play a role in keeping the system active, the responsibility for change is not equally shared. White racism is ultimately a white problem,
True.
and the burden for interrupting it belongs to white people.
Also true.
Thurman Sparks and Phillips, 1997, Hooks, 1995, Wise, 2003. Conversations about whiteness might best happen within the context of a larger conversation about racism. It is useful to start at the micro level of analysis, and move to the macro, from the individual out to the white fragility.
Oh, then we got a page. All right, so hey, I'm not going to read all this. I mean, this basically obviously has some more references to it. She's citing where she comes from. I think I started a little too high, like at the conclusion. But yeah, this just is grounded in reality. And it's giving an opinion. It's giving a perspective. But it isn't actually demonizing white people in this way. There's, I'm sure, criticisms of white racism, but here it's talking about how white people own this problem, and it's not demonizing them. Whereas Croc's entire piece was about dehumanizing the woke folks who have woke privilege in their woke ideology, which they try to protect through their woke fragility. All this kind of garbage. So by the looks of the poll, you all are tired of hearing it from Croc. So next week, we're going to go back to some philosophy of social science, wrapping up here in an hour. If you want to hear more, or if you want to torture yourself and read more crappy, unsubstantiated, self-indulgent, vacuous writings by Croc that are pretty poorly structured and don't do the four things. What is my question? What is my answer? Why should you believe me? And why should you care? You can go on his Medium thing, I guess. But I can do a thing now. Hold on. I can put on some jazz music in the background, I think, if it comes up. Yeah, there we go. That should be like a little background sound, because we're going to wrap up the show. Yeah, I'm gonna just want to thank everyone for stopping by. Dan Fan, Trans Gamer Girl, Easy7, Andrew, thank you for stopping by. Troy, PZ, yeah, and also PZ Meyer. Yeah, I think he would do great at the next MythCon. Oh, and if you didn't hear about it on the happy hour, after challenging his takes for quite a while, Brian Edwards decided that he wasn't just going to lob insults at me about mental health. He tried to challenge me. We ended up engaging on somewhat of a productive level, and he has agreed to debate me, which is I'm great. I'm really very happy about this. I think it's I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. And the topic. So I don't know if it's all going to come off, but I'm gonna do my bit to make sure it happens. The proposed question is critical race theory a religion? I wanted to make sure I got the wording on that precise. Is critical race theory a religion? And it will be on modern day debates if we can make the arrangement. The idea would be that it is for probably like an hour, maybe 90 minutes, depending on how it is. But my proposal that I'm going to offer him is to have each of us have a 5-minute opening, and then a 5-minute response, and then like maybe 2 minutes to ask. But what I really want to avoid is crosstalk and talking over people, because I think that the best way to have these debates is to give each person a chance to speak without the other person jumping in and interrupting them. So that's my goal. We'll see if it happens. And if it does, I will let you know when and where, and you can join the show. So next week, we are back to... I've got my book over here. Yeah, it's under a whole stack of things. But we're going to get back to, by popular request, theories of social science. I'll make a decision. I know we were doing some stuff on, I think, rationality and heuristics. So I'll have a little bit of a look and decide what would be more good content for next time. My one hair is very flippy on this side. It really wants to do this, and I want it to do that. When I go take care of my flippy hair, I will see all of you all next week. Oh, Brian's going to get destroyed. Yeah, I mean, if he's going to try to argue the case that critical race theory is a religion, that's a tall order. That's a tough position to sell, just definitionally. So I've got a couple counter arguments already prepared, and I'm sure I will develop some more. All right, I have been Kristi. You have been awesome for just enduring that slog of text and self-congratulating nonsense. I will be back next Sunday, but until then, be happy, be well, and be awesome wherever it is and whenever it is that you are. All right. Catch you later.